Sometimes you just run out of time. And other times, maybe you run out of gas. And sometimes you get so hopelessly blocked that you simply can't stomach the idea of starting just one more cue. I mean, we've talked about how important sustainable creativity is for the production music composer, but what happens when you got nothing or a deadline hangs over you like the sword of Damocles? Well, today, I'm going to give you the 4 ways that I jumpstart my own creative process when time is short or energy is low. Plus, we're going to feature the winning cue from the latest 52 Cues Production Derby Challenge, which gave participants just 48 hours to write a brand new epic orchestral hip-hop cue based on a public domain Christmas song. All of this on this week's episode of the 52 Cues podcast. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Cues podcast, a weekly podcast dedicated to all things production and library music, where we talk about industry topics and take deep dives into the different aspects of being a working production music composer. Plus, we feature a cue written by a member of the 52 Cues community, and this week I am thrilled to be joined by Jeff Hargrove, whose cue, No Place for Merry Gentlemen, was voted as the winning submission for our Christmas in July 52 Cues Production Derby Challenge, where participants had just 48 hours to write a brand new epic orchestral hip-hop Christmas cue based on A Christmas Carol, so you definitely want to stick around for that interview. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so glad you found me. However you found me, I know you have a ton of options out there, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening as an audio podcast. So I want to thank you for spending part of your day here with me. I also want to give a special word of thanks to the family, friends, and patrons of 52 Cues who help keep the podcast, the channel, and everything you see here going on. We are 100% community supported, so if you like what I do, don't thank me, thank them. And if you want to learn more about how you can help support 52 Cues and also unlock extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, masterminds, and a ton more, then be sure to click the links in the description or stick around, because we're going to be talking much more about that a little bit later in today's episode. So I know we've all been there. We've all been there, whether, like I said, we have a deadline looming, or maybe we're just empty, or maybe you were the puppy that finally caught the car you were chasing, and you got a library placement, or you got published, and they wanted 10 or 15 more tracks. And maybe you feel a little empty. It could be really, really scary, especially if you haven't quite figured out your sustainable creativity and you're still working through the idea of where your ideas come from. And we've talked about, where does creativity come from? And I'll put a link up there for you. And we've talked about that before, but I just wanted to talk about some very specific ways that I buoy my creativity, that I jumpstart the compositional process. And they are, and I'll list them out, and then I'm going to talk about each of them. First of all, part number 1, or way number 1, is recycle a cue's sounds. Recycle a cue. It's kind of like a template, but not really a template. So that's way number 1. Way number 2, referencing and modeling. Way number 3, clear your head. Walk away, clear your head, maybe go do something else creative. And the way number 4 that I jumpstart my creativity is just play. Just put your hands on an instrument and play. So let's unpack these. Number 1, first of all, recycle a cue's sounds. Now, what do I mean by this? This is as simple as taking a cue that you've written, that's already been mixed, that's already been mastered, all the EQs and everything are all working, and quite literally do a save as of that file, and then strip out all of the MIDI. Just strip out all of the regions, so you're left with all of the tracks with all of their EQs and effects and mastering chain all in place. And then for bonus points, tweak the tempo a little bit and just start writing. And I would encourage you not to listen to the cue right before you do that, because you want to kind of have that, you want to get that sound of the previous cue out of your head. But this accomplishes a couple of different things. And the biggest hurdle this helps me to jump over is picking sounds is probably the single most time-consuming aspect of composing for me. The notes themselves, the little melodies, the parts, the actual work of composing seems to go relatively quickly. But it's the auditioning sounds, listening to patches, finding everything, especially if you're looking at tension cues or any type of a cue where you're diving into omnisphere or into the depths of complete, by native instruments. That can take a really, really long time. And it can grind your creative process to a halt, to an absolute halt. But starting with a sound palette is a fantastic way to shortchange all of the time that is usually spent auditioning patch after patch after patch after patch. The other thing that it really shortcuts is the mixing process, which I think is probably like the second most time-consuming aspect of writing a cue, which is the post-production. The mixing, the EQing, balancing levels, and then the master. And so what I will do is I'll leave all of the faders exactly like they are. I'll leave all of the EQs in place exactly like they are. The mastering chain, I'm using Ozone. I don't touch it until I'm ready to do the final delivery. But I find that it gets me like 90% there. Might have to tweak a few things just depending on maybe the key. Might have to adjust some EQs, or if some parts weren't exactly the same. But if I'm using all of the same bass type of sounds, all the same melody sounds, the same percussion sounds, then I'm so much further along in the production process by using the EQs and mastering chain that I have already in place. So the two biggest hangups, or rather the two most time-consuming aspects of writing a cue from scratch, not with using a reference or anything, is picking sounds and the mixing and mastering process. And so by taking an existing cue, stripping out all of the sounds and just writing from scratch helps to jumpstart my creativity and shortcut the production process. And if you have recorded sounds, because if it's a tension cue, then I have cymbal scrapes and all of other manner of recorded elements. Then not only are the EQs there and the faders right on, and the reverbs are all pointed to the right place, but as are the compressors. Those things that I have to kind of meticulously dial in. I mentioned reverb. Well, the reverbs the sends are all in place. The track coloring, which I use for my organization, that's already in place. So a lot of the administrative work about running a DAW session is kind of done for you. And if you want to take it one step further, things like cymbal scrapes, risers, sweeps, these little one-shots, which you can use for transitional elements, sometimes I'll leave those in place as well. Because a cymbal scrape is a cymbal scrape. A bowed cymbal effect, yes, each one is unique, but over the course of a 2-minute cue, I might record 5 or 6 different ones. So I'll just take them and move them around. No need to necessarily record all those again from scratch. And so this has solved for me one of the biggest stumbling blocks to getting started. And when I'm short on time, that's one of the key ways that I'll almost find an additional 2 or 3 hours in the production process, depending on how dense it is. I'll save myself at least an hour, probably 2, because I would say that I probably spend, a good attention cue with a bunch of synth sounds. I probably spend about an hour finding sounds and picking my palette, and then another hour in the mix and master. Yeah, anybody watching my live stream will attest to that. Now, of course, this hour isn't 1 hour of just picking sounds. It's usually picking a handful of sounds and then starting writing, and then as I'm going through the production process, finding other sounds I need, and then I'll go dive into my the sound palette. Another benefit of using a pre-existing cue as a basis for another cue is you're kind of guaranteed that the sounds will pretty much work together. That the overall, this pad is going to blend nicely with this guitar, which is going to blend nicely with this string sound. And so, again, it shortcuts that production process. And so I actually have a Logic session pulled up here because I want to just show you how simple it is. So this is a cue called Presumed Innocent. It was accepted by the publisher and published. And so all I would do is do a save as, and so I might call this, new cue. I need to make sure I don't want to put this in the same, so I'm going to put this in the same root folder because I'm making sure that I'm not overwriting and nothing's frozen. I've got all of these sounds and the cue sounds great. I really am very happy with the cue. All right, so that's absolutely working, but I will quite literally just take all of the regions and delete them. I'll open up my files. I'll delete any unused files, clean up the session, save it, and then just start writing from scratch. I might also tweak the tempo, maybe put that like up to 100. No, it's not liking that. Maybe put it up to 100. Just so the delays and everything don't get so far out, and just start writing. Just start writing something new. Now, if you do this enough, then you can create essentially your own bank of templates. I'll have several cues that I can all use together, and it creates, this is this type of tension cue, this is this type of tension cue, this is this type of happy clappy cue. Yeah, super, super straightforward, very easy, very reproducible. And once you get a handful of cues that you can, that have been published, then you create your own stable of templates that you can pull from at any given time. So give it a shot. Now, where we have to be careful is we have to make sure that we are removing all of the sounds, and if you're keeping percussion, it can't be such an identifiable percussion sound that it causes, you don't want to trip up any content ID or let alone copyrights. If you keep enough percussion sounds that if you were to give the percussion only stem, then it would essentially be the same stem, across cues. That gets a little squirrely, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. But things like cymbal scrapes, especially cymbal scrapes where you're moving them around and putting them in different order, that can absolutely be done. So that's the first thing I do. If I'm short on time, I find a cue that is right in the wheelhouse of what a new library is looking for. I'll open it up, strip out all the sounds, and write something new. Different tempo, different key, different melody, all of that. Maybe even different time signature. The point is to shortcut the sound selection process and the mixing mastering process to greatly reduce the time spent on that. So that's the first way. The second way that I jumpstart my creativity is leaning into references. Now, I've talked about references a ton here on the channel, and you know that I believe firmly in the power of using references, because I don't think we should ever just open up a DAW, blank DAW, and just go. I think we need to have in our mind what we are writing, whether you're trying to picture a scene or, whether you're trying to capture an emotion, however you do it. But even that can really only get us so far. And luckily, most libraries are really good at providing references. I mean, Taxi is amazing at giving references. Look at all these YouTube clips and sound files, and here are all these references. And I'm trying to think, I do believe that all of the libraries I work with provide references. And so if I'm feeling kind of empty, if I need a creative jumpstart, then I lean into the references. I will listen to multiple references, extract what I can, and let something from a reference spark an idea. Whether it's the sound of the drums, the tempo, the melodic idea, the way that this delay interacts with the melody, the way these effects are working together, or just kind of the vibe, production techniques, something like that. I will mine the reference, like panning for gold. Like I put all the mud in the little pan from all these references, and I just swirl it around and hope that the silt falls through the bottom. And what I'm left with is a gem, a little fleck of gold that I can. Is that how panning works? I don't know. I've never actually panned before in my mind. It's just like there's a little screen on the bottom and the silt falls through. But now I'm thinking about it. Maybe you just kind of swirl it around and you're hoping. Anyway, if you pan for gold, let me know. Let me know how it actually works. But the idea that you put all these references together and you're just kind of swirling the ideas in your mind so that certain things sparkle, catch your eye, and then you can, okay, now I can use them. And so if it's a certain sound, then go into your library and just dial up that sound. Listen to the references, and if it's 3 references and they each have tempos that are within 1 or 2 or 5 BPM, then just set your DAW to that tempo. I mean, I've talked about using references responsibly. I'll have a link to that as well. I've talked about how we can extract information from references. So when I need to buoy my creativity, I definitely don't start with a blank DAW, and I don't start with not knowing what I'm going to be writing. Because references are as equally as important to nail what the library is looking for as they are to buoy your creativity, to give a real shot in the arm to get your process going. And there is like an ultimate form of this, which I call modeling, compositional modeling. And the TLDR of what compositional modeling is taking one cue. This usually works much better with complete cues, not just, references, which might be 15, 20 seconds long from a clip, but take a complete cue and using it as a blueprint, not to copy, not to plagiarize. We're not cloning, but to use it as a blueprint to inform your compositional decisions. Because really, that's what all these shortcuts and jumpstarts are all about. It's about shortcutting the compositional process, about allowing another element to make decisions for us. Whether it's a reference deciding for us, whether it's our sound palette from reusing a cue sounds, leapfrogging over several compositional decisions that we have to make every time we sit down to write a cue. And so using a model, taking one cue, putting it, into your DAW and going measure by measure, analyzing what sounds you're hearing and what those sounds are doing musically. So if the sound enters and it's maybe a staccato string sound, then after I do my complete analysis, my form analysis, I'm given a structural, an instrumental, a harmonic, and even a melodic blueprint that I can then use to write my own cue. I do modeling in one of two specific purposes or instances. The first is when I'm just creatively empty and my creative well is dry, bone dry. And I just literally don't have any idea where to start. I'll find a cue that I like that's really doing everything that I need it to do. And I'll set it in my DAW and do my complete rhythmic, harmonic, melodic, structural analysis, which takes some time. But I take an inventory and then use that as kind of a recipe to write my own. So if I'm feeling completely empty, that's when I'll use a model. When I was wrapping up writing 45 cues for a 45 of one specific cue for a library. They wanted 3 albums, 15 cues each of the same type of cue. By the last 3 or 4, I just had nothing left. So I modeled. The challenge with modeling is making sure that it sounds original, that you're not cloning, right? We're not doing a sound alike, and we sure as heck can't plagiarize. But that's how we have to be really, really careful. The other time I will lean on modeling is when I'm really looking to learn a style. And in the references, it's just not really sinking in. If I'm listening to multiple references, then I will model. But it's a fantastic way to learn how a cue is put together and to help buoy your creativity. And modeling is also important as a learning tool. And it reminds me of a quote that something Questlove said. Amir Questlove Thompson, the drummer and music director, he wrote a book on creativity. And in that book, he says that in order to learn to create, you have to learn to recreate. And so modeling helps with that. It helps you understand how these cues are put together by modeling another. Now, if modeling is something you're super interested in, then you be sure to check out an upcoming workshop on modeling that we're doing, and this is available for the friends and family of 52 Cues. I'm going to be doing an in-depth, hour-and-a-half-long demonstration, unpacking modeling process step by step. So if that's something you're interested in, then check out the friends and family subscription. It is the September 2022 workshop, and that's coming up soon. I think it's September 26th. I believe. Yeah, September 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you're listening to this or watching this, well, beyond this, well, the archive is living up there. So if you're a friends or a family subscriber, then you'll have access to that video archive. So that's the second way. Way number 1, recycling sounds from a cue. Way number 2, referencing, and the nuclear option, modeling. Way number 3, that I jumpstart my creativity, is clearing my head. If I'm feeling blocked, then it's either, procrastination, or it's some sort of resistance that I'm feeling. And I have found that by just getting out of the studio and specifically doing something else creative, whether it's writing or whether it's painting, clearing my head, doing something else creative, sometimes exercise. The idea is to remove yourself from the pressure, right? The pressure cooker that could be staring at a blank DAW. And so by removing yourself, you're changing the energy around that process. And through that energy shift, I have found that creative ideas will start coming. Yeah, I find that when I study writing, like, writing a novel, that it informs my composition. The idea of narrative and storytelling informs my compositional process. Clearing my head, going and exercising. There's a reason that my miracle morning starts not with the shower, right? Not with breakfast, not with a coffee, but the first thing I do before I get going is exercise. Just this morning, I rode 14 and a half miles, 4:30 in the morning, trolling around my little path that I've carved for myself on the streets in my neighborhood. Got my own little route. And I've talked about Miracle Morning and everything, and I'll put a link to that video as well. The way that I've really embraced getting up early and taking advantage of that early morning time. But the exercise is first because it helps to just reset and clear the energy. And so that can be a huge help. And if the deadline's really, really pressing, then you might not have, an hour to give to go ride your bike for 15 miles, but you could at least step away, grab a coffee, maybe spend 20 minutes reading a book or something. The idea, regardless, whatever you find, the idea is to break the energy so that when you sit back down, you feel much fresher than you did before. Because just banging your head on a wall or on a DAW, I have found, doesn't yield the best results. And so I usually end up trashing that stuff anyway, or I might get sleepy, or I might get frustrated, and that's no place to be. No library wants a cue from their composers that is coming from a place of frustration. I don't think so. And I want to believe that frustration, can be felt in the cue. Maybe, I don't know. Like, do frustrated chefs make angry meals? I don't know. So that's the third way. Way number one, recycle sounds. Way number two, referencing and modeling. Way number three, clear your head. Step away, create some space, and then come back to it with a fresh perspective. And then the fourth way, if I am feeling blocked, or if I'm feeling like the ideas just aren't coming, even though there's deadline hitting and I just feel, I don't know, just play. Just play. Just pick up an instrument, whether it's a ukulele or drums, or piano, but put your hands on an instrument, my friends. Trust me. Put your hands on an instrument. Find a good sound that you like. Whether it's a Omnisphere patch, synth patch with a bunch of cool delays, whether it's a piano sound, find a patch that you like, or tune up your ukulele or guitar and just play around. Don't even necessarily play around with what cue am I writing? Well, I'm going to play around by playing a certain melody. No, I'm telling you, there's something absolutely vital to us as composers, expressing ourselves as musicians, that will translate and inform the creative process. I believe that. Now, what will probably happen is you'll come up with little ideas that you can use, but the idea isn't like to record them, because that kind of puts pressure on yourself. Oh, I've got to sit down, I've got to play, and I've got to come up with all these melodies. No, the idea is to just enjoy the process of making music. And I think it's really important that you do play an instrument on some level. I mean, there's something to be said. I recognize that there are composers out there who do their entire production process with the pencil tool. I have much respect for them, but I can't make that work. I have to put my hands on an instrument. Otherwise, I just don't feel connected to it. And so I want you to try that. And even if you're not the best pianist, I'm not. Even if you're not the best guitarist, I sure as heck am not that. I know like a handful of chords on a ukulele, and that's about it. But just play, just enjoy the process of making music. And you're going to find that it's going to start connecting some neurons for you. Some things are going to get unearthed because it's kind of like tilling the soil, right? So it's like running a plow in your creative field so that you can start planting things. And then you can start harvesting things later. And if you're not enjoying this, then the only thing that's coming to mind is crop rotation. In my middle school civics classes coming, or social studies, talking about crop agriculture, and I know very little about agriculture, but if you plant the same crop over and over and over, then eventually the soil loses nutrients for that crop. And so what you have to do is you have to rotate your crops. You have to plant corn in this field one year, and then the next year you plant potatoes in the same field. It's kind of like that. And so putting your hand on the instrument, learning some jazz licks, or watching a YouTube video and like, okay, hey, this is how you play Fur Elise, on piano. Or I'm going to learn to play Hey Soul Sister on ukulele or something. You are creatively rotating the crops from which you can harvest new ideas. And I believe that happens by putting your hand on an instrument and just play. I think in the world of modern production, that gets a little bit lost because we get so in our head about the production process itself and EQing and mastering and all these, velocity curves. And it sounds very technical, very an engineering kind of brain. And you bring in, synths, and you're talking about granular synthesis and wavetables and oscillators and LFOs, and those are all fantastic, right? I love learning about that stuff. But there's also something to be said about just the organic process of putting your hand on an instrument that creates, in my opinion, creates a tactile connection with the music. That's really hard to pull off with the pencil tool. That's what I think. Or at least, shall I say, that's what's really worked for me. But what about you? What are some ways that you have found to shortcut or to jumpstart your creative process, whether it's because you're creatively empty or because you have a deadline which you have to hit and you don't have time. You need to get there fast. I would love to hear what you do to help that process. Please let me know in the comments below. I read all of the comments and I do make an effort to respond to those, but I absolutely would love to hear from you. All right, we're going to take a quick break and hear from Mrs. 52Qs, who's going to be telling us all about the 52Qs community and how you can learn more about it. And when we come back, my interview with Jeff Hargrove, who is a family member over at 52Qs, and we're going to not only talk about his journey, talk about his creative process, but we're also going to listen to and see the session. He's in Cubase, so we're going to look at the Cubase session for his cue, No Place for Married Gentlemen. So we're going to take a quick break and then talk about that on the other side.
Hey y'all, I'm Shannon Croft, and I want to tell you that the 52Qs podcast is made possible by viewers and listeners just like you, composers and producers who are looking for a better way to connect and collaborate. You see, 52Qs isn't just another website selling static, pre-recorded videos to a mass audience. It's a fun, vibrant, and positive community that comes together online for sharing cues, getting feedback, and discussing what's up in the production music industry. You'll find both personalized feedback and live interaction, which are the best and fastest ways to grow your skills and earn more placements. The best part is that the 52Qs community is absolutely free. And when you're ready to take your career to the next level, we offer friends and family subscriptions, which unlock weekly live streams, live interactive group feedback sessions, monthly interactive workshops, and more. Head over to 52cues.com and sign up today. And while you're there, check out our personalized feedback videos, private lessons, and of course, merch. I can't wait to see you at 52cues.com.
That was No Place for Married Gentlemen from Mr. Jeff Hargrove. And Jeff joins me today on the podcast. Jeff, what is happening, my man? It's so good to see you.
What's up, Dave? Good to see you as well, man. Good to be here.
Man, I gotta say, this cue, it's a cue after my own heart. And this cue, as I mentioned, was the winner by popular vote. At 52 Cues of the Christmas in July Derby, which was all about creating epic hip-hop Christmas music. And this, there were some really, really good entries, and you had some stiff competition.
Yeah.
But if there was one that was kind of like, man, that's exactly the kind of cue that I see. Well, it's the kind of cues that I write, that I submit up to football. And for the record, I didn't vote. I didn't have a say in it. I didn't vote. But really, really well done, Jeff. I appreciate that entry. So tell us a little bit about. Well, before we get into the cue itself, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, and you're a fantastic part of the community. Love having you here, but tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Well, again, my name's Jeff Hargrove, as you guys can see there. Originally from New Jersey. I grew up in Atlantic City, South Jersey. Kind of studied music all my life. quite honestly. Fourth grade, started playing clarinet and, woodwinds and all that good stuff, saxophone, jazz ensemble, concert band, orchestra. Always had a love for music, man. After high school, went to Howard University, studied music there as well, music education, but I wrote for the jazz ensemble while I was there, played in, different, all the bands, everything, jazz band, concert band, orchestra, community orchestras, etc. And I've always had a passion for music, man. Always wanted to write. It was always been my dream to write for television and for film, but kind of life got in the way, if you will, over the years. And then just here recently, in the past, year and a half or so, I decided, all right, it's time to really go back for it, really pursue it with everything that I have. So that's where I am now. Besides that, I'm a minister of music at my church, a keyboard player, etc. Work in the gospel music industry on the label side. So got a lot of stuff going on.
I'm always interested in talking with folks who have pretty established careers in the industry that make the transition into production music. And, last week we talked on the podcast, we talked about how that can be a real challenge because you're approaching an industry which you kind of know about, but there's so many little things that kind of are variants from what you're so used to. So tell us a little bit about that transition coming from fourth grade band up to a successful career as a music director and on the record label side of things.
Oh,
How's
man.
that been going for you?
Well, I got to tell you, Dave, it was a real shock to learn what you do not know when you think you know so much about music, because production music is its own animal, if you will. So, kind of getting into it, I decided to take, as many composers do, the taxi music route. To kind of get my foot in the door and kind of figure out, man. And, I started submitting cues, and they're calling for, say, something, in a trailer style or this. I had no clue. So one, learning the form first. I had no idea about form and how to be. And now they would send references and I would hear it. And I go, oh my God, these things sound amazing. I don't know how they do it, but it sounds amazing. And I just, give it my best shot and return. Man, I've got, that first, probably 6 to 8 months, man. And I mean, I'm writing, incessantly. I'm just writing, trying to learn, how to mix, trying to learn. I knew nothing about, mastering all this stuff. And I'm like, well, why do I have to master my music? Somebody, I'm on a label side.
Somebody else's job.
Yeah. So I'm used to, you record and then you hire an engineer to mix, you hire a mastering engineer to master. So, trying to learn all of that and learn how to write and learn how to write in a proper form and context. Whew, it's a lot, man. And it was, I mean, a lot of hits, a lot of gut punches, but it taught me and it continues to teach me, even today. And that's why I joined 52 Qs as well, man, because I want to learn. I want to continue to learn about production music and how I can be successful, in this particular side of the business.
Yeah, what are some of the skills, the skills as a music director and as a player, and what are some of the skills that have translated the easiest to production music? Is it just like the piano chops or what?
Well, here's the thing. I would say definitely the piano chops. I mean, I knew how to work in a DAW, already, because over the years, I've always kind of done stuff or, recorded or, pursued things sort of as a songwriter in the past and, different things, done recordings with my churches, done recordings, with the label. So working in the DAW was cool. I was in Pro Tools for most of the time. And then I guess about 8 months ago, I decided to learn Cubase because I know a lot of media composers, etc., either use Cubase or Logic, and I'm not an Apple guy, so I know,
We can't all be
yeah,
we can't all be perfect,
yeah, I
Jeff.
know, Dave, I know, but yeah, so I learned Cubase, so I think even though that was a challenge, kind of just, getting my mind around, kind of some different
Yeah.
commands and things of that nature. But the piano definitely helped. I think my understanding of harmonies and, kind of how to put music together help, melodies, things of that nature, definitely. And my experience, having written for jazz ensemble, having played in orchestras, having played in concert bands, I think all of and every week, working with a team of musicians, to put together a set for Sunday morning, whatever, all those things certainly have helped me, as I delve into this.
Are you finding any of the production music skills kind of working their way back into your like music directing or your Sunday morning platform? Like, you know what? We really kind of need a breakdown here or
Well,
something like that.
actually, it's amazing because there are definitely similarities, in that regard.
Mm,
You talk about building energy and these things, and as you say, layering and all that stuff, man, it really does. I mean, even though production music is its own animal, a lot of it makes sense from the standpoint of music. You don't want to sit and hear somebody at 100 the entire time of a performance. You know what I
right.
mean? It has to have some ebbs and some flows and things of this nature. So yes, I think there are definitely some similarities that cross over to
Yeah.
that side as well.
Yeah, especially, if you think about like programming the music for a church service and programming the music for an episode of television, right? There is an emotional journey. That
Absolutely.
you come in the door, there's your theme song, it's high energy, and then you might bring it down, where it goes into more of an intimate place, and maybe during prayer or meditation or whatever. And so, absolutely, you kind of ride that wave of intensity. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I've noticed that as well. And it's interesting. Sorry, I don't mean to be talking about church music and stuff, but as I'm thinking about it, because Shannon's a music director,
Hmm.
and I've been playing in churches all my life,
Hmm.
but so much of church music talks about accessibility. Because if you're asking a congregation of non-musicians to be able to
Right.
sing along, to be able to understand, I mean, you kind of have to tap into some basic human emotions that can't be overly artistic, if you know what I
Right.
mean,
I know exactly
right?
what you mean.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm just now making that connection,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Down to the least common denominator so that people can
hmm
get it for sure.
Yeah, safe keys, easy
Yeah.
meters. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
That's our bread and butter, man. All right. Well, that's a whole other podcast topic right there. But let's talk about No Place for Married Gentlemen. Well, actually, I promise we're going to be talking about it. But when it comes down to the type of music that you want to write,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's from an artistic or artist standpoint or production music, is there a genre that you kind of gravitate towards mostly? Is there a type trailer cues or tension cues or whatever?
Yeah, so I would say definitely cues that are orchestral in their
Mhm.
nature. Whether it be epic, whether it be emotionally uplifting. I certainly gravitate towards those, and have, I would say, probably in the last 4 or 5 months, really started gravitating towards tension cues. Really like
Mm.
writing them. I just love kind of what you could create with them. So I would say really those are the two areas. Now anything I'm talking fantasy, orchestral hybrid, epic orchestral, but kind of I just love the strings and the brass and the woodwinds and kind of everything working together. But obviously when we get really epic, the woodwinds they go home. They don't get the
Right.
gig. Yeah, so.
No, they don't. Sorry. Yeah, nobody's dialing up an oboe
Nah.
player, oboe patch for big giant
Yeah,
Brahms
yeah.
and
I need that
sci-fi
epic oboe.
trailers.
I need that
Uh,
epic.
There's somebody in Hollywood about to make that. I'm sure Spitfire is about to make the epic oboe library.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
400 oboes or something.
Yeah, and I have to say, your music Your command of harmony, your command of orchestration, I think is absolutely fantastic. In the mastermind groups or listening to your cues week after week, I'm always pleasantly surprised, and your harmonic choices inspire me. Like I'm like, man, I need to up my harmony game because this is the real deal over here.
Appreciate
And
it.
so that command of harmony, is that coming from your understanding of like just concert music or church music, or was there a lot of specific study into orchestration and modern harmonic techniques?
I think, quite honestly, the harmony comes from one. I think my early days of just loving jazz. One,
Mm,
I just, and I still love it, but I mean, I was just really, really, deep into jazz, and then gospel music as well. The fact that I'm a gospel musician, I don't think a lot of people know. I mean, the way that we learn by listening. We
yeah,
don't,
it's all by
yeah,
ear.
it's
Yep.
all by ear. We don't, I don't bring my team a chart and say, here it is. I send them a link to a song and say, learn this.
Mm.
And that's the way we learn. So, I mean, you get comfortable just, hearing, these chords and all their extensions, but also all the substitutions, that can be used to really make something interesting. And I
Yeah,
just,
I've
yeah.
heard. Yeah, I've heard some of the sickest harmonic shenanigans in gospel
Yeah,
songs, and you're like,
man.
"Oh my, this is so
Yeah.
advanced," and it's just, I mean, I'm all kind of jealous. It's just easy. It's just they make it look so easy. I
Yeah.
had a student back in Memphis. I think Shannon talked about him when we
The
talked
piano
about,
player, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember that
yeah,
story.
and he he could just do all of this real like planing, tritone substitutions and key changes. Like we know all 12 keys,
Yeah.
right? But ask him to like go to a dominant 5 to a 1 chord in the key of G minor and
Right.
then modulate. As soon as you start thinking theory,
Yeah.
then it kind of starts falling apart. But
Yeah.
where he became a rock star was when he could marry his gospel knowledge with the music theory knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
that's like beast mode right there, you know?
and you're absolutely right, because it does help. I think, at least for me, to understand theory, to be able to hear colors and understand what they are,
Hmm.
to understand how chords work in relationship to each other, to be like, oh, hey, man, I know if I modulate a minor third here, it's going to be great. You know what I mean? I know it's
Yeah.
going to work. Those types of things definitely are helpful, I feel.
Which is interesting because if you're talking about enjoying tension music, you have to throw most of that harmonic playbook out the door.
That's
You
been
can't, you
that's
can't,
been
it's
an
way
adjust,
too much.
that's been an adjustment, Dave. That's been an adjustment. What? Lay on this one note for how
Yeah.
long? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You're going to, if you're lucky, you'll get 2 chord changes if you're
Right,
lucky.
right.
And then they all have to be, yeah. So that's interesting to hear you say you're enjoying tension
But
music
I'm
because
enjoying it. Yeah.
I feel a stretching. I feel a stretching in your spirit, moving forward in that.
Oh yeah.
But it just, but all, we're joking about that, but you're gonna, I think, be able to bring in a certain aesthetic to it, which might be, the next thing. Who
Mm,
knows, man? Who
yeah.
knows? And so I encourage you to keep pushing back. Like if I'm giving you feedback, and I'm like, oh, it's too many chord changes. Like, but this is the way it's going to be. I'm like, all right, that's
Yeah.
cool. It's your cue, and it might just absolutely fit together. So I encourage
Yeah.
you to keep experimenting. Just know that if you're writing a survival cue, for somebody out in the wilderness, with a GoPro and a Bowie knife, probably don't want to do a bunch of like gospel chord
Nah,
changes.
you like that,
Probably not.
13 flat 5 and all that. Nah, that's not gonna
Right,
work, right?
exactly. No, that doesn't scream running from a bear. So now finally, No Place for Merry Gentlemen.
Yeah.
The orchestration was absolutely fantastic. But one genre I didn't hear you really talk much about was hip hop. So do you do a lot of hip hop programming? I know that the language kind of overlaps, especially some of the harmonic language of hip hop and gospel. There's absolutely some overlap, I mean, culturally and demographically, whatever. But was this a stretch for you writing hip hop like this?
Yes, a definite stretch. As a matter of fact, I always ran away from it, to be quite honestly, man. I don't know. I just, felt like, I guess from an authentic place, it's kind of like, I don't know, I really can't write it, is at least the way I thought, about it. And this, I think, was probably the second hip hop feeling cue that I've written. Because I've typically, I mean, even all the taxi listens, when I see that stuff, I'm like, nah, that's not me. I just be like, no, so I just wanted to kind of stretch myself, and try to see, if I could do it. And it's cool. I mean, I've listened to hip hop. I think mentally, I understand it, but, I always felt like I couldn't get the gritty enough to make it happen,
So what were some of the unique challenges approaching this?
I think, man, the groove, man, having the groove, man, that just really locks, the 808 bumping, that type of thing, the use of, the 808 snares and those things. But I think, because for me in hip hop, it's about the groove, you know what I mean? And it's really about that bottom, and that kick, kind of being locked and really popping or whatever. So for me, that was really the major challenge, I think.
Yeah, and I remember, because this is we did a couple of revisions on this,
Right.
And I remember originally you approached this kind of as an arrangement, like here's the whole song,
Right.
God rest you merry gentlemen,
Right.
and we kind of had a hook, but after we got over the initial kind of bump, 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 the kind of the little riff, we kind of settled into the arrangement, like verse, chorus, verse, verse, chorus, chorus, or whatever.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about that process, about walking that back and having to kind of change the mentality when you're approaching a cue like this, which is the song, but not the song.
Yeah, well, quite honestly, for me, a learning experience. And I think that's where, like, somebody like you who has tons of experience, in this area, can help to, because I just never would have thought about probably arranging it the way it finally came out from, and I think you said, hey, think about it as samples. I can't remember how you put it, but you put it in a really cool way.
Yeah, we said think of it more like a remix.
Like a remix, exactly. Now, it made total sense. You know what I mean? So, doing it, but it's, is the challenge, I think, is, okay, well, I got to make space for this. Oh, well, I have to move here. Okay, well, what's that? I got to cut this or whatever. But from that standpoint, it really kind of makes sense, and it frees your mind, I think, a little bit as well, because like you said, in my mind, well, the song is this, and then it goes to this, and then it goes comfort and joy, so,
yep.
Do the song, but no, so.
Yeah. Approach, and this is for anybody out there looking to do kind of these epic versions of whether it's a trailerized song or something like this. Treat it like a remix, and you have each individual part kind of as a chunk. Think it like you're a DJ, and you have these little parts, but ultimately you want to keep kind of people dancing, right? And so, da, 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 comfort and joy, right? That's not really, it's not the hippest part of the song,
right?
But you came out, and I'm going to play a little bit here. You came out really strong with this groove, bump, 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 bump. And then you immediately hit bump, bump, da, da. You immediately hit God rest ye merry gentlemen. You hit it, and it automatically starts evoking the cue. So we're 15, 20, 30, nearly 30 seconds into the cue before we really hear, the hook. God rest ye merry gentlemen, right? And so that's what the cue is about.
Yeah.
these types of like I said, remixes or these types of epic football type of cues, uh, they're not about playing the song and having the song go. It's about
Yeah.
kind of invoking the feeling of the song so that people can listen to it and think, oh yeah, that's God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. But ultimately they're listening to dialogue or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think you did a fantastic job, and you rolled with those changes. You know, the hey, you should try this, which I think is a testament just to you and just your infectious smile. You know, you're always I can't imagine you like angry or anything. I'm sure you get angry, but you're just such an eternally positive person, and like you just rolled with those changes. You're like, yes, and so man, Jeff, I know that the universe has amazing plans for you. I know I say that at the podcast,
Yeah.
and I can't remember if I've told you this, but I've sent this off to my CBS publisher,
Oh, wow.
and he loves it.
Wow. No, you did
We're
not.
gonna, yep.
Wow.
I wanted to tell you the news.
Oh, come on,
He
man. That's not right,
absolutely,
Dave.
he absolutely loves it.
Wow.
And he says, "Man, Dave, this sounds like something you would write." You know, and I
Yeah.
said, I know. And so he loves it,
Awesome.
and it's going to go up to the package to CBS.
Oh, wow.
For their Christmas.
Wow.
Around October or so is when we start sending out like the holiday package, because then they start, you know, it takes a little while to trickle through the system.
Yeah.
But he loves it. He wants it in his library. So be on the lookout for some paperwork on that. But this is absolutely home run. It was an automatic yes from him. So, but Jeff, man, I just, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm so glad you're part of the community. And this cue was great. And a huge thank you to everybody who participated in the Derby. And you weren't alone.
No.
So many people said that they were pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. You know, they're trying new things. You said this was like the second hip hop cue you've ever written. And that's absolutely amazing. I do love the fact that you kind of stayed like the orchestration and all of that. That's what you really knew.
Yeah.
And so you weren't going so far out of your lane that it was all foreign. But some people really took large swings and had never done hip hop before, which is exactly what that Derby was about, which is putting people out of the comfort zones. And we do derbies, you know, for you listeners and viewers, we do derbies periodically, once every couple of months or so. This was a 48-hour derby, which is another thing I didn't say.
Woo.
All right, so let's talk about that.
Oh, my goodness.
You had 48 hours to write this. And we've, you know, after and the voting was, you know, on the 48 hours. The version you're hearing right now has had a few tweaks, but not much at all. But tell me about that writing process. You had 48 hours to write it. Walk me through those 48 hours.
Well, the first thing I think the critical thing for me was identifying the song. And I know I just had maybe two or three, but I knew I wanted something in a minor key that was more minor feeling, because I just wanted that vibe, you know, with the song. And then I've always loved God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. And I knew I wanted it to be kind of epic orchestral. So the first thing for me was kind of figuring out the key. I think I actually started in C minor on it, but I knew I wanted the horns to play a pretty big role in the melody. So I took it up to E minor, and it just seemed to really kind of live really nicely in that regard. So it was really for me, I think, about figuring out how to get the melody to work in the field. You know what I mean? How do I pace the melody where it really kind of, you know, speaks, but how do I give it that, you know, great energy as well?
Mm-hmm.
So, but Dave, once I kind of got that going, you know, the changes are the changes, you know, and I know, I do some harmonic shenanigans here and there, but, but, you know, but that comes after I know, you know, I've kind of laid out, you know, everything, and I get that idea. Then it's just about, okay, now what can I do to make it a little more interesting? And for me, typically that might be something harmonic or, you know what I mean? Or kind of playing with the rhythm of the melody a little bit, things of that nature. And then, of course, figuring out that groove. The toughest thing for me was getting, I had never used Splice. I don't know if I can talk
Mm-hmm.
about other companies on
Yeah.
here.
No,
Okay.
yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I had never used Splice, so I had to, set up a Splice account, go try to find some 808, all that kind of stuff, figuring out how do I even program these types of drums? Do I use Groove Agent, in Cubase? Do I just, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn the sampler in Cubase as I was going. I'd never used the sampler in Cubase. So it was a kind of a lot of that as well, learning as I, kind of went along. So in my mind, I knew what I wanted to create. And it was just a matter of, man, how do I get there?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and what about the you had 2 days to do that?
yeah.
So were there some strategies? Did you like kind of plan ahead of time and then started on that 48 hours, or
Now,
how did you tackle the time constraint?
man, I just, quite
You just did
honestly,
it.
I just did it. Yeah. And I got done. I had a little kind of grace, I guess, with when, it was actually due. So
Hmm.
I would say I got done probably, with, I don't know, 6, 8 hours to spare. Or whatever. But me,
Yeah.
I'm the type, man, once I kind of get in, I can work for, hours on end and, not stop. My wife gets on me all the time, like, you need to eat, you need to do this or whatever. So if I get in,
She's a studio widow.
if I get in a groove, I'm good, and basically I would just kind of, do some work, get it to a point, go do what I need to, do or whatever. I probably had 2 or 3 sit downs with it. It honestly, it kind of
Hmm.
wrote itself, Dave. And I know that may sound weird, but I know you've had experiences when, man, sometimes a
Yeah,
cue just
absolutely.
writes itself. And this was one of the cues. It was actually it was easy the process. I'm saying in terms of the cue just writing itself. I didn't feel like, oh my god, I only got 2 hours ago. It wasn't any of that. So
Do you feel like the time constraint kind of helped focus your creativity, and you didn't have time or the luxury of just kind of piddling about? You're like, I got to get to business.
absolutely, man. There's nothing like you got to
Yeah.
make a decision. You can't sit around like you say
Yeah.
fiddling around with it. It's like you got to make a decision. And some of those
Yeah.
choices, they may not, wind up being the best choices, but sometimes I think they are because it's your first idea, is your first choice, and oftentimes that's what I had to do. I had to go with that first, idea. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is, and yeah, you have to. You don't have time, like you said, which I do
Yeah.
a lot,
And
by the way.
I think it's right. Just endless tweaking, like, oh nope, nope,
Right.
I'm going to change that. Yeah, just this morning I was sending a cue out, and even though I had already spent probably 6 or 7 hours mixing it, and
Yeah.
tweaking it, and I thought, I wonder how Logic's binaural panning would sound. Like, why am I
Yeah.
doing this? I need to get it out the door.
Oh
Quit
my God.
fiddling with the mix,
Yeah, man.
because I call it creative scarcity. Like if you create an artificial creative scarcity, whether it's limiting yourself in time, you only have 48 hours, or you can only use 8 sounds or 8 layers, or I can only, use organic sounds, or everything has to come from Omnisphere or something.
Yeah.
That creating that creative scarcity will spur, I've found, ideas
Mm.
because you don't have the luxury of second guessing yourself for the most part.
Yeah, and see, I don't do that
Yeah.
to myself. I like that. Yeah, I had to do it for the Derby, but I don't know about
Yep.
if I'm going to create the
That's
scarcity
that's
for
why.
myself, man.
There you go. All right. Well, the next derby is going to be Jeff. Just for Jeff, you can only use use stock sounds. Go. But man, Jeff, thank you so much. Like I said, thank you so much for being such a fantastic part of the community, and really, really appreciate you. If folks wanted to learn more about you, do you have a website or socials and anything?
Yeah,
Where
so
where could they hear more of your stuff?
no website, man. I'm the worst, dude. I got a YouTube channel, Jeff Hargrove Music. with a few things on there. I have Instagram on. I have my music nowhere. I am the worst at promoting and marketing myself. I have to get better at that. Jeff Hargrove, I mean, you Instagram, but you're not going to find my music there. So unfortunately, a little bit of my music on YouTube. That's it, man. I know.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds like you need to go back and re-listen to last week's podcast where I said you have to treat this like a business. So that's for you, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
And maybe a call to Shannon is in order, and she can help you out with some website stuff.
I got to up my game for sure, Dave. But if I could say this, but if I could say this, Dave, I want to make sure I get this in before we go. Everybody, if you are not a member of 52Qs, and Dave doesn't know I'm doing this, and he has asked me to do it, but I promise you, it has been the absolute best decision that I have made. What a wonderful group of composers, man. Dave and Shannon, they care, man. They love this community. They pour into it. It is just a great place. I mean, the composers, man, they have so many things that you can be a part of. I'm developing relationships, with these composers, outside of the music. So if you're looking for a place to learn, to grow, in a safe place, man. Now we let you know, hey, this is what it is, but it's a safe place where you will really grow. Composers on every level. I mean, you got cats out here that are doing it up. And then you got cats like me that are just trying to, get it going. But it is a great place to be. Highly recommended.
Man. You'll make me emotional, man.
Hey, man.
Thank you, Jeff.
You got yeah. Awesome.
That means a lot. I appreciate you, man.
Awesome community, Dave.
I appreciate you. With Jeff, like I said, I know that the universe has amazing plans for you, and I thank you for being such a valuable part of the community. Thank you for participating. Thank you. I believe, and I'm going to name it, claim it, speak it into existence.
Let's go.
I believe that this is going to get air this season. I'm here for that.
Let's go.
And I feel honored to be even a small part of your success. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Appreciate you very much.
Once again, a huge congratulations to Jeff. Thank you so much for joining me. And thanks for being such an amazing member of the 52Qs community. Really, really appreciate you. If you find the feedback that I give here on the channel helpful and you'd like personalized, in-depth video critiques of your own cues where, I break down things like form, structure, harmony, mix, and a ton more, then head over to 52qs.com/coaching. And while you're over there, you can also check out my other coaching services like one-on-one Zoom sessions, as well as mastermind groups where we work together towards your own career goals in production music. So once again, I want to give a huge shout out to the family, friends, and patrons of 52Qs who help keep the lights on here. We absolutely would not be able to do any of this without your support. But that's going to do it for me today. Be sure to tune in next week when we're going to be talking about how production music is different than other careers as a composer. So how is production music different from film scoring? How is production music different from, let's say, game music? How is production music different from songwriting? So you definitely want to stick around for that. So I hope that you had a good week 36, and I know that week 37 is going to be amazing. How do I know that? Because I know that the universe has amazing, amazing plans for you. So I'll see you next week. Until then, peace. The 52Qs podcast is copyright 2022 Dave Croft, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the 52Qs community and submitting your cue for consideration on the podcast, head over to 52qs.com.